Hello. This is the first recorded and kind of organized, although not really organized, presentation I've given in a while. And so today, the 19th of October, is the 100th anniversary of Volga German autonomy. Lenin signed a directive establishing Volga German autonomous workers' commune on this day in 1918, so exactly 100 years ago. And this directive established a titular territory for the Volga Germans within their traditional areas of settlement in accordance with the legal structure of the RSFSR. The Soviet Union itself had not been created yet. That happened in the end of 1922, in December. But in October 1918, we have the core, as it were, middle part of the Soviet Union, as it will become in the future, the RSFSR still, and the creation here of one of the first autonomous territories based upon a nationalnost. And interestingly enough, it's to the Volga Germans, who are a diaspora group having migrated to the Russian Empire starting in response to the Manifesto of 1763 and the first colony being established in 1764. So they have not been there a whole long period of time by the time the territory was established. They had only arrived in the late 18th century, so they had been there less time than colonists in the United States or in South Africa and some of the other places in the Americas as well. So one of the important things that this decree does is number 7, the operational article, is the cultural life of German colonists to use their native language in school, local administration, courts, and social life is guaranteed. So they have the right to use the German language, particularly in education, in the legal system, in the local governing system throughout the territory, as well as all public social functions. So the German language has an official status here, is used in both administration, including the court system, and in the educational system. All right, so I'm going to talk about what is accomplished during the period of time that there is an autonomous territory for the Volga Germans within the RSFSR and then later the USSR. So we're talking 1918 to 1941, so almost 13 years. The Volga Germans are deported between 3rd and 20th of September 1941, and the Volga German ASSR is officially abolished in the middle of this deportation on the 7th of September 1941, and its territory is divided between Saratov and Stalingrad Oblast that are adjacent to it. And so what is accomplished, or what was attempted to be accomplished in the Volga German ASSR, as it is upgraded to on 20th of February 1924. So it gets a new name, and in 1926 a full-scale constitution for this territory, and of course the upgrade in the titular name to the most highest status a territory can have within the RSFSR, and the second highest that one could have in the USSR. So 3 things basically. 1, the attempt by the Soviets to create a Volga German nationality that would rule the Volga German region under the precepts of socialist ideology within the Communist Party, in union with the other nationalities in the Soviet Union, under the control of Moscow and the all-union Communist Party of the Soviet Union. This largely failed because they were unable to recruit a large number of German cadres into the Communist Party to administer the territory on behalf of Moscow. That is, they remained dependent upon non-Germans for most of the administrative positions within the Communist Party in the Volga German ASSR. A second thing was to try and create a Volga German nationality in terms of culture that was distinctly Soviet in its content while being German in its form. So the use of the German language in particular is promoted particularly within the educational system, but also the media and various cultural institutions, book publishing, theater, radio broadcast, scholarship, research, ethnography, and museums attached to that are all promoted by the Soviet government to distinctly develop the Volga Germans as a completely separate nationality rather than being part of a much larger German nationality where the vast majority of the population live outside of the USSR. Even within the USSR, 2/3 of the ethnic Germans lived outside of the Volga German ASSR. So in creating various German language institutions, particularly in education, they're pretty successful. By 1939, the population in the Volga German ASSR has 370,000 Germans, and this is out of a total population officially of 606,500 people, but this figure is compensating for losses during earlier famines in 1921, 1922, and in 1932, 1933. So the real figure is probably about 565,700 people total. So the Germans are a majority, but there's still significant Russian and even Ukrainian minorities in the territory. So out of the German population, 117,000 are students attending 446 schools, and there are 4,320 teachers, a pedagogical institute in Engels, 4 teacher training colleges, and then of course a host of institutions of German language that are not strictly educational but related, such as libraries and reading clubs. Right. We can look at those numbers in 1939. There are 406 libraries in the Volga German ASSR, 5 theaters, of which 2 are state theaters and 3 are Koholz and Sovholz theaters. And finally, the third point of the Volga German ASSR was to develop the territory economically along socialist lines, to completely transform the pre-socialist, largely agrarian economy, and to make it a socialist economy that was moved increasingly from agriculture to industrial production. So that is, within the Soviet context, fairly successful, although there are quite a few setbacks due to the Civil War and forced requisitions of food. There is the 1921-1922 famine, and then again due to forced collectivization and particularly dekulakization in 1930 and 1931, there is a second famine in 1932 and 1933. But we can look at the low point of grain collection in the Volga German ASSR is in 1924. They are recovering from the famine of 21-22, 14,200 tons, very little. And in 1940, the year before the mass deportation, 1,186,900 tons. So there is a massive increase from the low point to the high point, and it would have been much higher if there had not been another setback in 32 and 33. But the purpose of this video is not to be blackpilling, because I have lots of other videos on the horrors of Soviet rule, including the famines of 1921, 1922, and 1932, 1933, the Volga German ASSR, and other places in the Soviet Union, particularly Ukraine. But this is to kind of show what accomplishments there were for the Volga German during the period of official autonomy that lasted 13 years between 1918 and 1941. So really, industrialization starts to get underway in 1924 to 1928. And this is 1928 then. We have the first 5-year plan, so again, a greater stimulus. But the problem, of course, is the destruction of agriculture through collectivization, dekulakization, and then finally there's the 32-33 famine. But certainly after that period of time, 1934 to 1940, there is again another recovery and significant development, which is interrupted by the complete ethnic cleansing of the Volga Germans between 3rd and 20th of September 1941. So to sum this up, it's not supposed to be long. In terms of creating local German cadres that would communize the Volga Germans, the project was a failure. In terms of creating a Volga German socialist culture, it was fairly successful, although the socialist part, of course, was resisted. But there were a number of German language institutions, particularly in education and media and the arts, that were built during this time, and you had flourishing of, in this case, of the knowledge and the use of the German language, both orally and, more importantly, in written form, people reading and writing in German, elimination of illiteracy in the Volga German ASSR. Everybody that was an ethnic German there could now read and write in German, which was not the case in the pre-Soviet period, although they had a relatively high literacy rate compared to other ethnic groups in the Russian Empire, particularly the ethnic Russians who were surrounding them